This is Living Life with Brendan podcast, inspiring people to choose to focus on the positives and live a life with purpose. Welcome back to another episode of Living Life with Brendan podcast. I'm really excited to have my guest on today, Mike Hutton. Mike, thanks for coming out today.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate you having me.
Perfect. Well, let the viewers know a little bit about yourself.
My name is Mike. I grew up here in the Twin Cities in Apple Valley. I've got a twin brother, Nick, that of course knows you from past days working, and then I have an older brother in the Navy who lives out in California right now. Married and have a couple kids, and enjoying the end of fall here and the beginning of winter.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I thought this would be a really fun episode for viewers because ever since my injury, obviously my physicality and physical body has been limited quite a bit here. And I've really focused on my mental strength and kind of how I navigate life kind of day by day with that, different overcoming obstacles, mentally trying to stay strong, focus on the positives. And just going back through kind of your history, learning through Nick, uh, you know, being an athlete, you guys are extremely competitive, and then your career throughout serving in the military as well. I thought you'd be a fantastic guest. Come on, really just kind of get inside the mind of someone that goes through this. So, thank you for kind of being our our guest here today, just to get a chance to do so.
Yeah, man.
Perfect. Well, I guess just kind of going through and starting from a young age, I know you played sports with Nick, your twin, and that was pretty common. And then your dad was military,
Mm-hmm.
and older brother was military.
Mm-hmm.
But as you became, in high school, you guys played soccer together, did really well. Like we talked about before, kind of the Pioneer Press Player of the Year, your senior year. And then you went to St. Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And what made you go to St. Thomas?
Yeah, I think when everybody's getting to that age in high school, you're trying to figure out what the direction is for you, right? You know, a lot of athletes are trying to go play sports in college or trying to go figure out what's next. They want to go to a destination. For me, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, it's kind of a murky area where like all those things sound pretty cool. You know, one thing that I thought was fascinating or cool was, potentially going into the military. But then again, even though my folks were in the military or my dad was in the military, my brother, you honestly still don't know anything about it,
Right.
right? So, um, yeah, I ended up finding a good path to getting college paid for and still being able to play sports in college, and that kind of drove me towards St. Thomas.
Nice. So when do you think that you decided on St. Thomas? Was this like a last minute senior year, or is this junior year?
No, so the way that it works is, I knew I wanted to become an officer, and so there's an ROTC scholarship or an NROTC scholarship, and you have to apply for it. It's pretty competitive. So you have to apply for it basically in the summer before your senior year,
Okay.
and then you go up for a number of boards. You have to do some interviews and some physical tests, and you put this whole package together, and then you find out, kind of mid-year, mid-fall, late fall. And so it was a cool little deal where they came and presented me with a check and a scholarship at high school, and that kind of sealed it in. And then from there, you choose what school you want to go to.
Very cool. How many people get that? How many people get that, that time, like you said, they came out with a check in school? Do you roughly know if you were one of 10, or if it's more like 100 people, or?
No, it's much more. It's a very, very low percentage of people get it.
Okay.
It's a very competitive bill, or bill it for people to get. When you talk to recruiters, they get pretty excited when they find a candidate, to get that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I could find the numbers later, but I can't remember it right
No,
now.
that's perfect. Super cool. So you decide to go to St. Thomas.
Mhm.
Let's just say freshman year. Are you taking regular classes then, and then it's ROTC with those classes?
Yeah, college was tough. So yeah, your normal classes, normal sports, and those two things can be an adjustment, right? Like you're on your own and trying to manage your schedule. But then you also add ROTC, and that was a 5 day a week commitment for me in the Marine Corps. You have physical fitness, or what we call PT, in the mornings. Every morning, and so I'd have to get up at 5 and go over to fitness, which is over at the University of Minnesota. And we'd have it from basically 6 to 8 every morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then we'd have drill or labs, which is your courses, your history, your marching, your weapons history, or weapons handling things like that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and so you basically do that in the mornings, go to class in the afternoons, do practices and games in the evenings, get your uniforms ready, and do it again the next day. So
Good lord. I'm just getting overwhelmed listening about this right now. As an 18-year-old just going I went to Gustavus, played hockey there, and I can't imagine. So you're in high school, right? Apple Valley, getting a chance to play, normal life,
yeah,
and then the jump to freshman year is like you become basically full time with everything, right? So your freedom then is very limited once you go to St. Thomas. What's that shift for you mentally of having all this time in high school, right? I mean, you weren't in the
yeah,
military
yeah,
classes to now, I mean, you're 5 a.m. to basically end of day and you
yeah.
keep doing it every day. Was there a big learning curve and shift?
Yeah, definitely. You almost feel a little bit, well, you certainly feel overwhelmed, right? You get your head shaved,
Oh,
yeah, you have to get a haircut every Sunday. You're trying to make sure your uniforms are pressed. You're trying to not step on yourself, and everything from setting 3, 4 alarms so you're not late every day. Honestly, school and sports certainly took a back seat, right? There's no punishment for missing class in college. There's no, um, you know, punishment for even showing up late to sports, right? Because it's like, hey, sorry, I had so much going on that they're like, yeah, I don't care, sure, you're good. But for ROTC, you get your wrist slapped a little bit. So like that's really what threw a lot of stress on in college for me. But you just kind of learn to grind with it. You just kind of get used to a new normal. People adapt. For sleep. That was probably the biggest physical change was certainly the sleep. Getting about 6, 7 hours a night. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, physically it wasn't that tough. Coming from an athletic background, it was just mentally a new grind that you kind of had to get used to.
what and just kind of focusing on that, what would you say, how did you learn? Was there someone that helped you along the way on the mental side of things, or is this something where like I need to prioritize this? So for me, kind of when I go through kind of challenges and steps, it's like I know where I'm at now. I need to
Uh-huh.
be realistic about where I'm at. And like what's that next step look like? What do I have to overcome to get to that next point? Is
Mhm.
that kind of slowly how you did it, or what did you find worked for you?
I'd say that for me, it was to start, it was like staying out of trouble, right? Like, all right, how do I not, yeah, how do I blend in? How do I stay out of trouble? How do I, just kind of flow by, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's how it started. Once you start to get a grip on things and you start to get a little bit more self confident, you start to, connect with people that you enjoy being around, right? You figure out who are your friends, who are the guys that, they're coworkers or peers or whatever, but who are the people you really connect with?
Mhm.
And for me, it was really around connecting with certain people that I enjoyed um, being around. Um, and then it turned from trying to stay out of trouble to like, hey, how can I make this either fun or how can I succeed or do well in certain things? So it certainly transitioned as you go from kind of that shocking phase right
Right.
away to understanding a little bit more.
And as you progressed from freshman year, sophomore, junior, senior,
Mhm.
did the commitments change as you go through ROTC throughout those years?
Yeah, big time. So your freshman year, you basically get a red shirt year, if you will, where you can quit after your freshman year and
Okay.
not have to pay anything back. So like, we had a lot of people that quit that ROTC class after that freshman year. Um, you know, so then after that, it's all about training to what are the next schools, right? So after your junior year, go to officer candidate school, which is essentially your boot camp.
Mhm.
So you're training for that, and then after you get through that, then you get back for your senior year, and then you're training to go to the basic school, and you're training to become a Marine Corps officer. And so it definitely shifts as you get through it, and it's just new stressors. We're no longer learning to do your uniforms and you put your stuff on straight. You're actually learning how to do military formations and how to do a lot more military type stuff.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And again, for the viewers out there, Mike not only was going to ROTC, but he mentions playing sports. You played soccer for St. Thomas and you ran track.
I did, yeah. So
And
I was able to play soccer in the fall and track in the winter and spring.
not just play on the teams. You were just awarded, what was that, a year ago?
I was inducted in the Hall of Fame
For your
for the three sports. Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Hats
Thanks.
off to you, man. Just being able, not just the sports, but just hearing about the military side as well is unbelievable.
Thanks.
Congratulations on
Yeah.
this. That's sweet. Very cool. So you had mentioned junior year. then you started boot camp
Mhm.
after your junior year of college,
Mhm.
and that was throughout the summer?
Yep, so it was, 8 weeks, or maybe it was 10 weeks, yeah, 8, 10 weeks, whatever, and on the officer side, it's called officer candidate school, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yep.
And for me, we watch movies, we see everything about boot camp, ring the
Mhm.
bell. You get sergeants screaming in your face all the time.
Mhm.
Is that traditionally what it is like?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So the, enlisted side is, more about, being able to execute orders on a command. Can I, listen to a command and make sure that this is being followed to the best of my ability?
Mhm.
On the officer side, it's, despite all this chaos going around, can I still make a decision? Can I still function? Right. So they threw different stressors at you. For example, um, in boot camp, if you screw up, they do something called, what's it called? They IT you basically, or they make you do 25 push-ups. They make you run around. They make you do burpees. They do all these things. If you screw up on the officer side, they make you do an essay at night under red lens. It's exactly 300 words, and words only count if they're 4 letters or longer, and you have to underline and label every word that goes,
Oh
and it
my
has to be
gosh.
exactly that amount. And so they could give you up to 2 essays per week, and on top of 2-hour fire watch and a few different things, like you really don't sleep a lot, and it can be very very stressful. And so they throw slightly different stressors at you
God,
on the officer side.
jeez. I can't even imagine right now. Again, I'd have to see it laid out for me to actually visualize and go through what this would be like. And you are now headed down a path of going into the Marines, right?
Yep.
What made you want to be a Marine versus all the different other avenues?
Well, the easy answer to versus it was really never considering the Army very much. I come from a Navy family. My dad was in the Navy. My uncle was a submariner for 30 years. My brother's in the Navy. I really didn't have any interest in being in a ship or flying or submarines or anything. So I decided I want to do something on the ground, and really, it's only the SEALs for the Navy or the Marine Corps. The difference between the two when you go to college is you don't have to take physics 1 and 2 and calc 1 and 2 if you go into the Marine Corps, whereas you do if you're in the SEAL. So honestly, that was probably the biggest tip of the hat for me. Was like, no, no, I don't need to do that.
Nice. Do you get any crap from the family about being a Marine versus
Oh,
going
I
into the
mean, they
Navy?
make their jokes. They
Right.
jarhead, and Marines have a stereotype that's very different from the Navy, and so yeah, of course, a little bit, but not like it's all in jest, and
Right.
yep, yep.
Okay, so you're going through basic training, first time through. What is it like if you can put yourself back in that situation of
Mhm.
now, is that are you going to, you're living in Minnesota. Is basic training, where is that located? I mean, where do you have to go to?
Quantico, Virginia.
Okay.
Yep. So Quantico, Virginia is also home of the FBI
Yeah,
Academy,
I've
right?
seen
Yep.
TV shows.
It's right there, and yeah, you get there, and um, you're in a class of like 300 people, broken down by platoons. Each platoon is probably around 50 guys, um, and it's pretty miserable, honestly. Like tough and miserable are two different things to me in this in for boot camp. Was it tough? Not not that bad, not for somebody with a background of sports, and, I had a decent blend of, being able to run, which is important there, or having fitness, but also I wasn't like the, 6'2", 140-pound guy that couldn't carry a pack, right? I could do a little bit of both, and I didn't struggle. So I never really struggled with the physical side, but mentally, it stinks. It's a grind, right? Like, especially when it's 9 more weeks and you're like, "This sucks every day," right?
Is it something where you are counting down the days, or is
Yeah.
that something where it's like you can't get in that mindset of being like, all right, day one's down, or is it more like a day by day, or do you think what kind of helped shape the mentality portion?
Yeah, you're counting down meals, right? So people people have a tally in their notebooks of every meal, right? And people cross off each meal. So
Wow.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you just kind of try to make it to the next meal. That's how you break up days for the most part. Yeah, so you certainly do break it down, and then again, you're finding people you like hanging out with or seeing, and you're not hanging out, of course, but um, you can kind of figure out who you like and who you don't, and you kind of have like little cheeky smiles, or you're winking at somebody during a crappy situation, or I don't know, you're just connecting with people in maybe less social forms, but you can
Right.
still do so.
Do you think now, for me, especially with kind of the mindset that I have, I do attribute a lot of the support that I have was from my family, but I think a lot of it comes from sports.
Hmm.
Just the competitiveness, to want to do better. Like you said, how do I get through this? How do I do that? Do you attribute a lot of your kind of success throughout the military and getting through all this to sports?
Yeah, I think it gives an edge. Like I think, yeah, I'd say that there's some athletes that I knew that certainly were incredible athletes, but I don't know how well they would have done in the military, and then vice versa. I know some people that were horrible athletes and some of the best military personnel around. So
Right.
I think it's an element to it. I think it's a tool in your toolbox,
Right.
right? That you have shared experiences of injuries or a heartache or triumph, and you see a little less triumph, right? In the same way, you're not scoring goals or celebrating wins in the military, but um, yeah, I think to a degree, right?
Mhm.
It's back and forth.
Do you think those people that you started to, like you said, kind of figure out who you want to hang around? Do you think since you'd mentioned you're able to carry your pack, you're able to run. Do you think you gravitated more towards people that were also having success? I was just wonder this on like a weird philosophical thing
Yeah.
of like the company that you keep tends
Mhm.
to be. So were there people that you gravitated towards that ended up failing out, or was it more so you were gravitating towards people that were kind of in the same category as you as far as being able to do the same things?
Yeah, I'd say at OCS, no. So Officer Candidate School. I don't think like the people that fail out are just usually not guys that you want to hang out with.
Yeah,
So it didn't really have to do with like what were their skills necessarily, because it was all. I mean, it was more miserable than it was tough.
right.
Once we got to TBS and you're starting to decide what we wanted to do, then yes, right. Like you start to gravitate towards people that yeah, I think are doing. There's more of a spread, I guess, right? So I'd say um, it didn't have to do with running or weightlifting or anything like that. It was more so like mentality. I think like
Mhm.
some people handle stress well, and those are people you want to be around. Like, do they have a sense of humor? Do they get stressed out? Are they frustrated? Are they short with people? Right? Like I feel like I just connected with people who were pretty chill, right?
Right.
So
No, and that's another thing I feel like I'm extremely laid back.
yes,
Just with a lot of the situations that I'm given, it's easy to explode in a quick sense,
yep.
right? Like everybody can. It's just the people that are able to kind of control it, figure out what's going on. So I completely understand where you're coming at with that one. You mentioned talking about miserable versus tough.
Hmm.
What was an example of miserable? Kind of that first time during boot camp.
Um, just Firewatch is miserable. Firewatch sucks. So in the
What's
middle of the night, you go to bed from whenever they put you down at 9 at night, and then you have to be up at 4 in the morning. Um, and so you'd have fire watch, which is basically somebody stands around and makes sure there's not a fire, right? Or make sure there's not something going on or something out of order, or they're making sure they have to count the rifles that are in the room, and they have to do all these different things and do these reporting. It's pretty stressful because the drill instructors will come through and you have to report exactly, and if you don't, they'll snap on you pretty good. But what was miserable about it was like you already don't have much sleep. You probably have to do a couple essays, and then standing fire watch. Um, just kind of stunk, right? Like it just wasn't fun, and that part was miserable. And then knowing you have another, it's just kind of the future of like, all right, I know this is gonna suck for another 8 months, 8 weeks, kind of thing.
So kind of navigating through, you start to get a foothold. You're getting through boot camp. People are starting to probably drop as
Hmm.
you get through. As you graduate through boot camp, now is there like a more of a mind shift? Do those drill and sergeants, that were yelling at you, are they now buddy buddy with you as you got through boot camp? Because you're not really there yet. Like you said, it was your junior year. You still got to go back to
That's
college.
right.
So as you complete boot camp, what is that feeling like?
Yeah, I mean it's an accomplishment. It's very different from the enlisted side, right, where they're going right into the fleet, and then we are going to either back to college or into our next set of military schooling. Um, Drill instructors generally are a different breed. Yeah,
Right.
they're a lot of them can be very cool, but they're definitely a unique set of folks. So yeah, sometimes they're buddy buddy, but Yeah, I was pretty disconnected from most of them.
Okay.
But yeah, there's definitely a different shift in that. Like, all right, now I'm through this as a prerequisite to getting here. Now it's, what do I want to do in the military, and how do I get to it?
Does boot camp help shape where you wanna go, or is it just something
No,
that everyone has to do?
yeah, and everyone has to do.
Okay.
Hmm.
So it's just another meal people are checking off,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's senior year, you're back at St. Thomas,
Hmm.
kinda going through classes and doing your was it still ROTC at this point?
Yep.
Okay. So you graduate from St. Thomas, then you immediately are like, "What do I wanna do now with my military? Where do I need to go?"
So the Marine Corps is fairly easy to show. So like most of the services, you get your job when you're in ROTC, and then you go to that school specifically, right? So if you're going to be a pilot, you're going to go to flight school. If you're going to be in the Army and you go to tank school, or you want to be a tanker, you're going to go to tank school, right? Infantry, same thing. In the Marine Corps, they send all officers to the basic school, which is also in Quantico. Um, and there you compete for what jobs you want to do, right?
Oh,
So there's 23 different MOSs, military occupational specialties.
yep.
Um, and they historically, chopped it up in thirds, right? So like, the top of each third typically gets what they want, right? You can't send all the good guys over to artillery or infantry or logistics, right? You have to spread out the best guys across, otherwise you're going to have a poor, force. And so, when you're there, that's you know about 1 year roughly, or just under that maybe. And so yeah, you're competing against in a class of 300 for slots of what you want to do.
Is it just constant testing?
Mhm.
Like, intellectual, physical, everything?
Yep. So the idea of the school is that every Marine is a rifleman, and so every Marine officer should come out with an understanding of what an infantryman does, right? And so in the Marine Corps, everything revolves around the guy busting in a door, right? A lance corporal or a private that happens to be going in a door, right? And everything around it, from the strategies to the supporting agencies to the training to everything, supports that person,
Okay.
right? And so for every part of the Marine Corps to understand how to support them, they put you through this school to give you a little bit of a understanding what that's like.
And where did you end up after that year?
I shot for infantry, and I was able to get that. And so then from there, I went to infantry officer course, which is a tough course, and that one's also very miserable. But that one's like physically miserable as well as mentally miserable.
So is that basically so you got to getting in where you wanted to go.
Hmm.
So safe to assume you were in one of the top of the 300? Do they know where you are
Yeah, you
exactly?
totally know where you are. Yeah, I was in somewhere in the top third.
Okay,
Hmm.
very cool. So you went to do that, and then is it like basic training all over again, just more specified?
Yeah, not like basic training in that, like, basic training is seems like kind of silly and menial. Some of the things they have you do, right? They
Oh
have you
yeah.
make your bed 30 times. They throw your boots in the woods and you have to go chase them and get back online in 20 seconds or less, right? This one, they are, putting you through like really pretty intense physical um um conditions, right? You have 100 pounds on your pack and you got to go an unknown amount of distance, and then you have an unknown number of days in the field, right? So, like, infantry officer course is probably best compared to something like buds. The difference between buds and infantry officer course is, at buds, you pretty much know everything that's going to happen in front of you. With IOC, it's a completely secretive school. So, you go into it not knowing anything, right? So, day one is this physical fitness test called the CET, Combat Endurance CET, yeah, something like that. Um, and it's somewhere around like a between 10 and 20 miles of stations, and in those stations, you're fighting people, you're swimming, you're doing fitness tests, you're doing land nav, putting weapons together, all of those things, and that's just to get into the course. We started with 90 people and we finished with 45, and I'd
Wow.
say about two-thirds of that drop happened on day one on that CET.
What do you have? Do you have any good stories from CET?
The CET, only that, I was a good runner, and so one of the final stations is fighting, and so when I got there, there were no other students for me to fight, so I had to fight the martial arts instructor, and he just beat the crap out of me, for 4 minutes, and I thought it was just a game of survival, so I just kinda guarded my ribs and
Right.
yeah, and took it, and he choked me out, and he choked me out, basically, get pretty close to blacking out. He'd slap me, and then he'd do it 3 or 4 more times, and then
Oh,
they failed me on it. And then I just kept running, and luckily I was good at everything else that they didn't fail me on it. It's a kind of an accumulative score of everything,
right.
so you can only fail so many stations, or you won't pass through. So
Okay.
I failed that station pretty bad, but I think most people would fail that one.
Yeah, going against the master.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's nuts. Yeah.
That's crazy. So again, kind of just culminating from your freshman year of college, getting into ROTC to where you are now. Now going into buds, like the mentality shift, is it just progressed from, like you had mentioned, getting everything down to now we're starting to do, this is my life. This is what
Um,
I'm doing.
it's hilarious because it almost is just it's like cyclical. It just recycles where you're like, all right, I think I'm getting a grasp of this, and then you go to ISE and you're like, holy cow, I don't know anything, right? And it kind of continues, right? You get through the end of what you were doing, you get to the next thing, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I understand the stepping stone here, but like every time you get there is almost overwhelming, right? And it's like probably a theme in the military too, right? Like whereas like anytime that you get very good at something, they try to put you in a new position, either in charge of more people or in a more difficult setting or different things. And there's a quote Nick really likes where he says, uh, "The SEALs, they don't rise to the occasion; they sink to the level of effort required. Or they sink to the level of their competition, right? So their training is so high that nothing's going to ever surprise them. They're going to sink to the level required rather than raise the occasion. It's kind of a difference in the
Right.
way that sports a lot of times are talking about it, right? We want to raise to the level of the championship game. This one's kind of the opposite, and I think that that's kind of similar to like how the military tries to train people.
Okay.
Is that you'll do an event in a gas mask and um, under intense duress so that when you eventually do have to do it without a gas mask and without any other stressors, like you're going to be a little bit better, right? So you want to sink to your level of uh, the level required rather than have to raise to something brand new.
That's interesting. And that's again kind of going with how I view things. Like I went through some serious surgeries,
Yeah.
like crazy things of having to blink to communicate to being on bed rest for 8 weeks. Like as I go through these master, like extremely long, grueling surgeries and spending time, like all the stuff that I like seems again not normal for surgeries and things
I,
like a UTI or whatnot. Like it just seems like a breeze
yeah. I don't think I
because
knew this. Can you explain the blinking thing? I
yeah,
don't think I
so
ever
when
know
I
this
was
story.
when I was first injured,
Uh-huh.
I had I dove in the water, right? And
Yep.
I fractured my C4, C5,
Yep.
but I had a crack in my C1, which is the top vertebrae.
Hmm.
So they went in and thankfully the first night they were able to do the surgery and they fused my 4 or 5 together
Okay.
and they thought that the C1 was going to heal on its own.
Hmm.
So that was the night that my parents decided to put me on a ventilator
Yep.
because there was a chance that I wouldn't make it if I didn't.
Yeah.
So they made that conscious decision. So
Yeah.
I had a ventilator, but I had tubes put in, and then the surgery completed. So as I woke up, I basically wasn't able to talk, wasn't able to communicate, wasn't able to do anything.
How long was that for?
I was on the ventilator for the first month and a half.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my
So
god.
I was blinking on a board with letters to my parents to like itch my head, scratch my face, because I couldn't move anything at this time. And even one of the tougher things that I ran into is I went out to Craig, Colorado to
Yeah.
get off the ventilator. I
Uh-huh.
passed these tests, went through, but as I got out there, they did a random CAT scan one day and they found that C1 that's in my neck.
They didn't heal.
It's actually spreading. So my head was shrinking into my spine. So then I had to get put on a halo, which, if you follow my Instagram and things that I'm going to start putting out, I still keep the halo in my room
Uh-huh.
because it was the most painful thing I've ever had to go through. I had screws that were twisted, quarter inch into my skull, 4 of them,
Yep.
as I'm awake. I don't know why they have to keep you awake, but so it stabilizes my head from
Of
shrinking. Then I
course.
had a second surgery done. So, and I'll show this on the back of my neck, I had like 70 staples put in just so that they could fuse from C0 to C5. So not only was I getting off the ventilator, I was like, yes, we're gonna do this. We're gonna start healing. They're like, we got a different
Pause.
plan for you. So we're gonna have to put you in a halo, do a second surgery, and that's when I now am fused. So my neck doesn't have a whole lot of
Movement.
movement to it.
Batman neck.
Yeah, basically, I'm in the suit right now.
Yeah.
You just never seen me and Batman in the same area. No, so that's kind of what I'm saying is I had to go through like these massive, events, and I think it's helped shape me for the mentality of kind of what's next and being able to overcome whatever I have. Because some of the minor stuff that I see now, It's like, I've been through so much more than this.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, same thing, like you guys' training is, we went through this in training where it was so much worse than probably what you were seeing
Yeah.
that I mean, you just hop and skip right over this stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like I said, you can keep following. And like I said, I'll share more and more as I go through too.
Yeah.
But so now that you've finished where you're at now, you deployed for the first time. How long was that after?
Yeah, so I went from so at IOC, you graduate that, and you're also ranked at IOC, and then from there you have like class advisors basically, and they're talking to different people out in the fleet, and they're trying to figure out, okay, when are you guys deploying? Where are the good deploying, or where are the good units? Where are the bad units? And um, I don't know if that's if it's people would already know this, but like they send the good lieutenants to the bad units and vice versa, right? Like they try to help lift the level of battalions.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, right? That's of course a stereotype, but they try to send you know a balance of the top lieutenants with the worst lieutenants to different places, and that's again to keep a high level of quality across the board, right? Um, so whether I was one of the top lieutenants or bottom lieutenants, I ended up going to 3-8 Lima Company, which was out in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I got done with IOC in September, and we had rumors that we were going to deploy as early as November. And then it continued to get pushed back and back. And so we ended up deploying in the spring of 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where were you deployed to?
We went to Romania. So Romania had this little base there that it doesn't matter where the base was, but it was kind of MK Air Base, and it was at the time when Ukraine was being invaded, in Crimea, and Ukraine is not NATO, but we're the closest country to that, and so we're kind of on loose alert for that. And then a couple of our other companies were doing embassy reinforcement. So a couple of my buddies went down into Libya, and yeah, and they basically evacuated an embassy there. And yeah, so we had different mission sets based out of there. But yeah, most of my time was either in Romania or spent across Europe doing training events in Georgia or Germany or things like that.
So as your first deployment, I mean, what's going through your head now as like this is happening,
Hmm.
right? So like you said, they said you get through, you're now in North Carolina, and they're saying, okay, you guys could be deployed as early as, is it the shift of, okay, this is really happening now. We got to get ready for this.
Yeah, so it all depends on the deployment you're going to do, right? So like I had some buddies that did go to Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's a wildly different deployment than what we did, right? Like those guys are going into potential combat zones, or dealing with IEDs, or dealing with all sorts of stuff that like was really more tailored towards your training.
Mhm.
For us, ours was more of a QRF, or a quick reaction force, or a stabilizing presence, in the
Okay.
area. And so really what we were battling was boredom and complacency,
Okay.
right? And so like the difficult part of that was trying to keep people engaged, and I just took over a platoon that had just come from Iraq and Afghanistan,
Oh, wow.
right? So they went from combat to now having this young lieutenant come in and for kind of what they thought, a lot of them thought was kind of a BS mission. Like, what are we doing? We're not doing anything, and so it can be pretty challenging to keep people engaged for sure. And so that was what the toughest part of that first one was just engaging.
How were you able to do that?
Oh, I don't know that I did it very well. We
Don't sell yourself short.
No, I know, but it was hard. It was hard first deployment. I was book trained, school trained. I was really good at the tactics and X's and O's.
Hmm.
When you go through schooling, you have all these like, hey, you should have your guys reading books. You should have these guys going through game studies and war studies and TDGs and all these different things, tactical decision games. And you should really be training them every day,
Right.
right? Um, so I went in there and was like, all right, hey, we're gonna do all these things, right? And then in reality, we probably pressed it too hard, right? Like we just should have given them a little bit more space, should have given them a little bit more freedom and time to do what they wanted, and just taking the gas off a little bit.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I don't think our first platoon was all that great, honestly, because of it. We were a little bit too much on the work side and not as much on the quality of life side. And so I think we were able to fix that on the second one. But
So on the, you came back then,
yep,
same platoon.
nope. different
Okay.
platoon.
And then you also deployed for the second time a
Yeah.
year later?
Yep. Exactly.
And that was just a whole they took you and threw you into a new setting?
Yep, yep. So I kind of alluded to it before, but like once you seem to get to the end of a phase, they put you in something new, right? So for infantry officer, you basically have your first platoon, and then from there you either go to weapons company or weapons platoon, or you become an XO, right? There's kind of three routes you can do. Um, and I went to weapons platoon, so I was in charge of mortars and rockets and mortars, rockets, and machine guns. And so then you're trying to employ those, and you're also in charge of the indirect air, right? So artillery and mortars and air from jets or helicopters, things like that. So you're controlling that. It's called a fist, fire support team lead. And so that was the route that I took. I had buddies that did those other three things, but because of it, I was in charge of a whole different thing, and I was in charge now of mortarmen and machine gunners and all these guys. So it was a very different platoon. And then our second deployment, we went down. We were based out of Spain for a similar mission, but most of our stuff was tailored towards Africa, right? So like it was actually a mission kind of born out of like Benghazi, right? So
Oh,
Benghazi
wow,
got
yeah.
overrun. We studied that quite a bit, and I kind of know everything that happened there and all that kind of the inside stuff there. But so we trained for TRAP, which was tactical recovery of aircraft and personnel. So say a jet went down or a drone went down in Africa, like if we had to go down and help get that and pull that out. Same thing with QRF or or embassy reinforcement. So if an embassy was being overtaken, then we would just go in and we'd secure it and help reinforce that. So those were the three core missions. What we ended up doing actually was going down into Cameroon, and we set up an air base for these drones to come in and support the African nations in their fight against Boko Haram.
Wow. So again, something completely different from what you did a year before.
Totally.
And, having to be able to adapt and learn about this, like, what does that take on you? Do you take time to reflect about this before you're going into these missions or going? Is there any sort of new training? Like I mentioned, the first time you deployed, you kind of were in the mindset of, this is what we're doing. I got to be able to do this. It's not so much as intense as people going over to Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
But now this one comes and it's a lot different than the first one. Is it like a day? Is it a week? How do you get into the mindset of like, okay, now we're really going to be kind of boots on the ground, looking at this as a whole different. Do you have to readjust kind of that mindset that you have?
Yeah, definitely. We had a new boss on the second one, right? So you typically have different battalion commanders for different um, your deployments or sections of deployment or your time there. And our second one was a guy named Reggie McClam, and he's the greatest boss I ever worked for. He was just the best, and he just set a really cool culture, where it was, you work your butt off, be the best at what you're doing, but you can also still have a lot of fun doing it, right? And so he had this acronym that was LEAD, and it was leaders lead from the front, lead by example. E was every day is a prep for combat, prep for life. So whether you're going to war or you're going to college afterwards, it's today is an opportunity to get prepared for that. A was always find a way to have fun, and D was do what's right, right? And like he just lead was his thing, and it was the coolest thing ever. And he set an amazing culture that made it very easy for us at the lower ranks to be able to get our guys excited for every day and for training and for things. And we had a way better platoon and battalion overall, honestly, under that second culture.
Do you think you still use that lead today with kind of
Oh,
everything that you possibly, I mean,
yeah, totally.
that's awesome. That's really cool. So as you're there then on your second, without the two times that you did deploy, are there any kind of stories or times where you were like, holy shit, like what's going on? I need to figure this out. Like any time where you actually felt like you were on the verge of breaking?
No, I don't think so. Not on the first one, I was very like pretty miserable, man. Like it stunk. Like it was not a fun deployment. Yeah, it's always the unknown, right? Like there's some like the art of being bored or the art of like keeping yourself engaged through boredom, I think is like truly a skill. And I think that some people have it and some people have to really work at it.
Yeah,
I'm in the latter. Maybe it's because I grew up with a twin, right? But
exactly.
I think like I was pretty miserable because I just didn't know what was next. I missed home. I didn't have a lot of friends on that first deployment, and as an officer, sometimes it can get a little lonely, right? Like you're not mingling quite the same way you are with your enlisted guys. Um, The second one, I don't know, you kinda just know what's going on again, and you get better at using your time wisely. You can, relax a little bit more, and so at no point on the second one did I feel miserable. We had a couple of hairy moments where I had people come to our posts on that base in Cameroon and yelling Allah Akbar, things like that. That was like, oh crap, trigger or no. Luckily, they never did pull the trigger. It was just drunk Cameroonians trying to
Right.
test our lines a little bit. But um, no, I mean, I never had a breaking point. I didn't think on the second deployment. The first one was mostly out of that boredom or feeling of just like what
Are
am I
you
doing here?
ever wanting, I guess, like on the first one, like you said, mentally you're kind of ready to go home?
Oh yeah, the whole time.
Is that something that on the second one, same feeling? Did it ever come
I
across?
mean, you miss people, but no, not the same way. Like the first one, I was just like, "Get me out of here! This sucks."
Right.
And the second one, and it's like you're sitting in these barracks, and you have hundreds and hundreds of, thousands of people probably all trying to battle for the same Wi-Fi. So it's a holiday, and all you want to do is call home, and the Wi-Fi's crashed, right? And you don't have anything to do. You can't go off base. You can't do much really. All you can do is work out, right? That's about the only thing you can do. Um, and so it was like kind of sad, or you just felt
Right.
lonely almost. Whereas the second one, no, I never felt that.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. And so you get back from your second deployment and now you're at home and kind of what shifts, I know you'd mentioned then going from where you were in the position to what was the last position that you moved into?
So between your first and your second deployment, you have to figure out if you want to make the military a career or not. And so if you do, you have to pass two boards. You have to pass career designation board, and you have to pass a captain's board, right? So one, does the military want to keep you in for the long haul? And two, can you achieve the next rank, right? Um, you also have to figure out what path you want to take. So, do you want to go big military, where you're in charge of a company or a battalion or whatever, or do you want to go do something more specialized? And I decided I wanted to do something a little bit more specialized. So for me, it was between MARSOC or the SEALs, and MARSOC did not have, they didn't exist before wartime, and we're coming out of war. And so I decided, I have a bunch of buddies in the SEALs, and they do have a mission set, so I'm going to go after the SEALs. And so I had trained for that, applied for an inter-service transfer, and I got it. They said, "Yep, we want you to come. Finish out your second deployment. You basically move over, and then we'll class you up and get going." So the Marine Corps did me a favor. I got back from a deployment, from that second deployment, and they put me in charge of the water survival school, which
Okay.
was pretty cool. So I was in charge of a bunch of um, dudes that hazed people in the water, and you got me ready for as best I could to try and get ready for buds. And then, unfortunately, when I was ready to move over to the Navy and class up, they found out I tore my Achilles in college and it axed the program.
Oh
So
no. So they took it all away because of a prior injury?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that just because they now say it's more susceptible for an injury in the field?
Yeah, I'm sure, there is a waiver process, that you can go through. It can take 10 months to a year, and I didn't have any more time on contract, so I would have had to get
Oh,
out of the military, apply for a waiver, and then go back in. I even had a general on my that I was reporting to that even was trying to find some creative solutions to this, and they couldn't do it. It was just kind of this goofy scenario where it's like, oh, road's end.
dang. I mean, coming from my injury too, and it's interesting, I see it in the movies again when you're talking about water training and basically messing around with people. I'm assuming they basically get them to almost tap out. A lot
Yeah,
of people probably black out from it.
yeah. I mean, most people tap out, right?
Okay.
So
Before they get
yeah, yeah,
unconscious. So when I dove in the water, hit my head, and then I was inhaling water throughout that time. But I think at the process, I was in shock, but I also never was in like a panic state.
uh huh,
I'm wondering if that's similar to someone obviously choking you out, the lack of oxygen to the brain.
yeah.
So are there people that, well, I guess it would be a lot different because they were panicking and fighting someone from
Uh-huh.
this. So are you on the side of did you ever pass out from it?
Um, no, I never passed out. I was pretty close, a couple times. Like you're testing your breath holds, and at the same time, like you have an app on your phone that's like literally training you into getting your breath hold up, right? So you can do different things. Um, no, I never like got close to passing out. We definitely had people that did for sure. You got to go swim a certain length underwater. You got to simulate a helicopter crash and this turning or a tank crashing, and so then people could do this, and then you got to go under and simulate them taking your gear off or you taking their gear off. And when others are panicked or hitting you or choking you out, like some of that stuff can get pretty hairy. And
Is it similar to the movies? Like, again, I see movies about all this with
yeah,
training
yeah,
and
yeah.
seals and, swimming and in the water. It seems just miserable.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, we had a pretty high failure rate. Yeah,
Okay. And then, going to not being able to make the seals, that obviously must have been just crushing as you found out
yeah,
going through. So again, with movies and like obviously SEAL Team 6 being most notably
of
one of the
course,
SEAL teams, do you ever wonder like, oh, that could have been me?
totally. Yeah,
And in every mission, I guess that they have to do, because they basically call the SEALs in for when they need things done.
yeah. There's yeah, the tasking, right? When a mission comes into the U.S. or the Department of State gets something they have to deal with, right? Then they're going to say, "Hey, military, can you deal with it? Yes or no?" No would go to CIA or one of the mm, tens of three-letter agencies. If it goes to the government, or excuse me, if it goes to the military, then you really have CAG or DevGru. So DevGru is SEAL Team 6. CAG is the Army version of it. And they each have certain specialties, and then even within that, you have different levels of the SEALs almost, right, where they attack certain things or geographic areas. And then from there, it just goes down to like, all right, do we need more people? And then we'll go to the Marine Corps or the Army, and there's tasking across all different things. But so I mean, you really have no clue what you're going to go into. I mean, you
Right.
might go into the SEALs, and you might go and just do mill to mill training, which would not be very fun. But
No.
you might just go do mill to mill training, and yeah,
Gotcha. So that did that end then basically your military career,
yeah,
in a sense that you weren't able to make the transfer over to SEALs?
yeah,
Okay. So I mean, obviously a crushing blow not being able to do that. So then how does the mindset for you then stem from, I've trained my whole, basically life for this.
yeah.
I wanted to switch over to being in the SEALs and make a career of it, to I can't do this now. So what's the shift? Did you take any time to be like, okay, now I need to retrack my life and figure out what I'm going to do?
Yeah, luckily, like soon before, I got that news is when I met Stacy, my wife.
Mhm.
So that was one of the things that for sure like kept me afloat was, like just all right, well, like I get to spend more time with this person and get to figure out what's next. And I saw more of an opportunity, honestly. Like this really stinks, but yeah, I can transition and there's a lot of cool things out there outside of the military to do. I think a lot of people in the military have a fear of not knowing what they want to do. Where
Right.
I'd encourage most people in the military, they can go do pretty much whatever they want, right? Um,
That's kind of another thing I wanted to ask too, is like the mindset of being deployed. Like, you hear about all this, and obviously people that are probably more in the heart and thick of battles, like
mhm.
being able to turn that switch on. I would assume it's something along the lines of kill or be killed, when you're out there, depending upon where you're going. Is that something that was difficult to turn on, turn off when you were getting deployed versus being back in civilization?
I don't think so. There's plenty of theories on discipline. I always was under the mindset you can turn it on and turn it off, right? Same way you do sports, right?
Hmm.
I don't need to make my bed every day to be disciplined. It doesn't mean I'm disciplined because I make my bed every day. There are certain people that are very organized and do that no matter what. But then you
Right.
get out in the field and are they cleaning their rifle, right? So like for me as a platoon commander, like I didn't care if somebody cleaned their room, but if they didn't clean their rifle in the field or they weren't prepared for our next movement, like we were gonna absolutely crush them,
Right.
right? And like I think you have to pick your battles because I think people only have so much discipline in them
Right.
that yeah. So I think it has to do with picking your battles a little bit.
I like that. Again, a lot of this podcast is choosing to focus on the positives.
Yes, right.
And I think even just with that, like day-to-day things, and like you said, the way that you handled the SEAL training, it's like, oh, I met Stacy. Like, this is an opportunity. I could sit and lull
Hmm.
about the fact like I don't get to be the guy that gets to be the hero or the team that gets to do this, but I found a new avenue where there's so many opportunities. There's so much positivity to being able to do what I did. I'm sure you're proud of what you were able to achieve, what you did with all the military, and then being able to kind of formulate that new life and move forward, choosing to focus on the positives rather than weighing on like, oh, I did all this work and now I can't do this. Like, woe is me. Why won't they take me? I'm just as good.
Hmm.
I mean, it's easy because a lot of people probably could have gone down that route and I'm happy that you didn't, and
No, thanks.
I think that's why we're friends.
Yeah.
Same mentality shifts, and so kind of what's new with you currently now?
So I got out of the military, and luckily I got an interview with a medical device company. And the boss there was a pretty cool dude that said, our stuff's not that hard. I just want people that can represent our company well. They work hard and they are trustworthy basically. And we'll do all the training ourselves. And so we had a pretty cool gang of reps at the company was called Applied Medical Technology, but we had former ball players and musicians and military and would people from all sorts of places. But we didn't just pull people from other med device companies or some pipeline, right?
Yep.
They just really focused on people's skills and soft traits more than hard traits or background. And I thought, that was pretty cool. And so I was there for about 4 years, and now I'm at a new company called Rapid AI. I've been here for about 3 years now, where we support hospitals with stroke care and aneurysms and
Very
different
cool.
things like that. Yeah,
And you're married to
married.
Stacy now.
That's right. Yeah,
Two little boys.
two little boys. Yeah,
Very cool. Growing up, military family. Have you thought about military for the boys?
yeah. I wouldn't care if they go in or not. I mean, I want to open their eyes a little bit to what it is. The military in 15 years might look very different, right?
Right.
The military soon after I got out was pretty miserable for some of my friends, through the COVID era. Like those guys, oh yeah, being in the military during COVID would have been absolutely horrific,
Are you
horrific.
are you still close with a lot of people that are off being deployed and
Hmm.
having that? So I guess again, just talking about, you're not too far out of Ukraine with everything that goes on and has gone on recently.
Hmm.
Do you have friends that are still out there? Has it changed from when you guys were?
I don't know anybody in Romania right now, but my brother Dan is on the USS Lincoln,
Okay.
and so they're tracking everything going on in South China Sea and everything tracking, down in Gaza and Israel, and I mean, there's world events happening, of course, every day.
Well, you get to be the front line of it from, Dan and having those people. So
Yeah,
hopefully it all continues to, progress in the right way and being able to keep everybody safe.
yeah, yeah,
Perfect. Well, I always end my podcast with kind of a mindset that we have, and the one thing that I have, being an athlete, I think similar mindsets here, and going through the military, everything that you've learned, how we shifted a little bit on focusing on positivity, but how will you continue to live life focusing on the positives?
How will I continue to live life focusing on the positives? I think it's surrounding myself with people I want to be around, right, and doing things I enjoy doing. Not necessarily like each day to day activity, but purposes that I believe in. Purposes I like and people I like to do it with. So that would be my answer. Is just
I like it.
surrounding myself to a
It seems like that's been a nice little kind of motto of throughout your whole life, right? People that you met in college, ROTC, as you navigated through the military, finding the right group of people that you have, kind of putting yourself in good situations for success.
yeah. I think so.
Perfect. Well, I love that. I think I do the same, but
You do.
it makes sense. And that's why we're friends. And again, thank you again for your service, first of all.
Yeah.
And thanks again for joining me here today.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Thanks, Mike. This has been another episode of Living Life with Brendan podcast with Mike Hutton.